And now it's time for us to discuss more of these headlines and simple keywords with Adam joining us via Zoom. Good morning, Adam.
Good morning, Lena, and happy Wet Wednesday.
Happy Wet Wednesday. That sounds mostly unpleasant. And it is.
It certainly is. It's really pouring it down right now, even as we speak.
You know, I looked out the window at maybe like 5 in the morning and I thought, oh, I guess it is autumn after all. The sun is rising later than usual. It's just dark with gray rain clouds.
Yeah, not the safest of environments. So if you're driving, do take care.
All right. And keep your weather updates handy. Speaking of the weather, that's where we're going to begin today's keyword news segment. This is our first pick of the day.
Typhoon Jongdari.
Typhoon Jongdari has weakened into a tropical depression as it moved closer to Korea's coastline. However, heavy rain and strong winds are still expected. So the typhoon weakened earlier than initially forecast, but we're still feeling the effects of it in the larger part of the peninsula. What's the latest?
Right, so Jongdari was actually never expected to develop into a strong typhoon, but strong weather is accompanying it still with the heavy rain that is currently falling in Seoul as we speak, as well as strong winds. Now, as of 9 p.m. yesterday, Jongdari was 30 kilometers south of the western island of Huksan and headed north at 37 kilometers per hour. It was packing maximum sustained winds of 54 kilometers per hour, and it was expected to make landfall this morning, and the indirect effects are certainly being seen as we speak. Now, the storm isn't expected to bring damaging winds as it passes through, but heavy rains are certainly in the forecast. Government officials still urge public vigilance, though, and monitoring high-risk areas for floods. The storm dumped around 60 to 130 millimeters of rain in some parts of Jeju and southern mainland areas before it is moving northwards. Luckily, there are no reports of injuries yet. Now, as Jongdari moves north, the nation's electricity demand has hit another record high. Now, this summer peak electricity demand has repeatedly set new records. Now, despite the high demand, the government noted that the power supply remains stable, so nothing to be too concerned about. Now, the approach of the typhoon brought hot and humid air, leading to high temperatures across the country. Cloudy weather in the Honan region, which houses about 40% of the nation's solar power capacity, reduced solar generation compared to sunny days, further increasing market demand. So, yeah, it means that a lot more indoor spaces are in want of air conditioning, and it is on full blast pretty much 24 hours a day. And it's the same for me. I'm pretty much turning on my air conditioner all day. I don't know if it's the most efficient way of use of electricity, but it's hot and humid, so there's no really any other alternative. And I can't bear the heat. I'm one of those people who just struggles during the summer. So, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are on the same boat as well. But yeah, the typhoon isn't really helping. I saw it certainly with heavy rain as well. A lot of people in the households are keeping their windows shut. And if you do so, it gets hot. So that means more air conditioning. So yeah.
Is anyone else having like an internal tug of war? Is this right? Is this wrong? Is this horrible for the environment? The culprit of the weather irregularities. But nonetheless, you're right. We must get some shut-eye, for example, and AC seems to be necessary this time of the year.
I do look at my air conditioner and wonder, is it time to switch it off every now and again? But then I wonder, well, I'm just going to sweat. So, yeah, I'd rather stay nice and cool and dry.
If you can afford to. All right. So Korea's electricity demand with, of course, like-minded people has surged to a new record low. Keep your weather updates handy throughout the day because we are feeling the effects of, well, that typhoon, right? Rain, clouds, and humidity expected. All right. On to our second keyword of the day.
Onnuri gift cards.
So the government plans to increase the issuance of the Onnuri gift certificate to a record 5.5 trillion won next year, significantly expand where they can be used. It's a record amount of subsidies to be allocated for small business discount coupons. Tell us the details.
Right, so the government and the ruling party in a meeting agreed to set aside a record budget to issue the discount coupons next year. Of course, it's to boost spending and revitalize the economy. Domestic demand has been pretty down lately. Onnuri gift certificates offer discounts for goods at traditional markets and small shops. They'll also ease the number of restricted business types eligible for the coupons from the current 40 to 28. So basically, you can use them at more places. Now, there are also plans to halve the fees for electronic kiosks used by small business owners. A lot of shops and restaurants use these kiosks, but there is a fee in housing them and for them to be used. And of course, that could be a burden for these, especially small business owners. So the government is trying to alleviate some of that burden. Now, for families with 2 or more children, meanwhile, they'll give 6 million won in subsidies for purchasing electric vehicles, something that's been a bit stagnant, especially lately with the concerns of EV fires. So there's been a bit of a dent in the demand for EVs at the moment. There's a lot of people who have made orders, cancelling their orders because they're just simply scared of purchasing such vehicles. Now, the government will also push for subsidies to help large families purchase vehicles like vans to address the increasing number of EV fires. Meanwhile, the government plans to distribute 90,000 fire prevention chargers and allocate funds for unmanned fire trucks and additional firefighting equipment. Discounts for the so-called K-Pass transportation card will increase up to 50% for families with 3 children. So basically more benefits and discounts for large families. Additionally, discounts for KTX and SRT trains, previously available only when 3 or more people travel together, will now be available regardless of the number of passengers. Of course, that is to boost more people going into, say, rural areas to spend more there and just boost overall local economies. The budget will also include funds to increase the purchase of homes for victims of rental fraud as well, from the current 5,000 to 7,500. So a lot of measures in place and policies in place to basically try and boost domestic demand.
This is just a side note, but I was watching one TV program about helping students excel in school and academia. They hire these tutors and incredibly famous teachers to essentially teach children to perform better on their college scholastic ability tests. But the point I want to make was one of the students I came across recently lives in a rural area. There's only 4 students in her entire class. So grade 3 middle school, just 4 students. But the beauty of that is with a lot of money for school trips, for example, they're going to Singapore.
Wow. Well, there you have it. I mean,
sometimes it works in that way, in an unexpected way too.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly
bigger budget.
Yeah, it's certainly lucky for those smaller classrooms. I guess they have more budget to do more luxurious things, I think. I mean,
they can afford to, I suppose. Of course, it comes with both pros and cons, but I guess that's something that I didn't realize was even plausible.
But I think the stress of college entrance exams are the same, whether a classroom is of 4 students or 20 or 30. So, yeah, I mean, you know, if they are available to, if there are means to give them a bit of a break and a bit of a good time out, then why not?
All right. So those are the latest government plans to focus on making people's livelihoods a little bit better. Let's move on to our third keyword of the day.
Household debt.
So Korea's outstanding household credit rebounded to a fresh record in the second quarter, driven by the continued surge of mortgages. So it's, the rebound in real estate transactions seems to be driving upwards Korea's household debt. Can you tell us more?
Yeah, so this, of course, comes on the back of the government easing sort of rules and rates of mortgages. So that's why, of course, demand has shot up. Bank of Korea data shows the outstanding balance of household credit was 1,896.2 trillion won as the end of June. This marks an increase of just under 14 trillion won from the end of the first quarter. Household credit refers to debts owed by households to banks and other lenders, as well as credit card spending that has not yet been paid off. Now, despite tighter monetary policies, household credit continued to grow in the second and third quarters of last year. It only decreased in the first quarter of this year by just over 3 trillion won. However, it has returned to growth in just 1 quarter. The number of housing transactions across the country grew to 1,701,000 in Q2 from 139,000 in Q1. Excluding credit card spending, mortgages alone reached 1,780 trillion won at the end of Q2. Other loans, such as credit loans, decreased actually by 2.5 trillion won, marking the 11th consecutive quarter of decline, but the decrease was much smaller compared to the 13.2 trillion won drop that we saw in the first quarter. Household loans are expected to further grow in the third quarter as well. A BOK official said the government and the banks are closely monitoring the situation. Now, as mortgages continue to grow with housing transactions increasing, banks have been raising interest rates for mortgage products, while the financial authorities are further tightening regulations. While many economists expect the BOK to cut its rate in October, that prediction could be pushed back if the housing market continues to show signs of heating beyond August. It's a tough balancing act for the central bank. There are many voices calling, saying that it is basically time for a rate cut. Right. But of course, if you look at the economic data as the ones that I've just mentioned, kind of creates a bit of a headache for the Bank of Korea because, of course, they don't want to do something that's too detrimental to the economy and make this household debt spiral out of control.
All right, we'll wait and see. But you're right, it is a delicate balancing act. When the timing of it also comes into question, September, October, we'll wait and see. It's also contingent on when the Fed lowers its interest rate, right? All right, let's leave it there for now so we can move on to our fourth keyword of the day.
Med reform.
So the government is considering introducing a tentatively named medical practice license, arguing that simply having a medical license does not ensure the ability to open a clinic or practice independently. So can you run us through the details of the government's plans?
Right, so this move is part of broader efforts to reduce the civil and criminal burdens on both patients and healthcare professionals in the event of medical accidents. Now, the Health Ministry stated that the current licensing system, unchanged since the Medical Service Act was first established, is insufficient in guaranteeing independent clinical competence. Now, however, doctors strongly oppose this idea, arguing that it would unfairly restrict their practice. Now, in Korea, once a medical student graduates and passes the national exam, they receive a medical license, allowing them to practice independently as a general practitioner without completing a residency in most cases. And according to the ministry, the proportion of doctors who started practicing immediately after receiving their license has been increasing over the past 10 years. And this trend has raised concerns about patient safety, leading the ministry to consider linking a new medical practice license, as they're calling it, to clinical training requirements. We can see this in the UK and Canada, for example, where doctors must obtain an additional practice license or undergo further training before they can practice independently. And so the government wants to kind of echo that or benchmark a similar move. Now, the Korean Medical Association argued that the new license would only extend residency periods and limit the ability to open clinics. They see this as an unnecessary burden that could reduce the number of practicing doctors, especially in underserved areas. Now, in addition to licensing changes, the ministry plans to establish a legal framework to improve communication between patients and medical professionals in the event of medical accidents. This includes learning from international examples where similar measures have reduced the number of lawsuits and legal costs. Whether that same kind of phenomenon will happen in Korea remains to be seen. Now, the ministry also intends to overhaul the medical dispute mediation system as well, which was introduced in 2012 to speed up the resolution of medical disputes. And it plans to strengthen support for patients, enhance transparency, and expand insurance coverage as well for medical accidents.
All right. With that, we move on to our final keyword of the day.
Soldier defects.
A North Korean soldier has defected to South Korea by crossing the border on foot. This comes only 12 days after another North Korean defected to the South in a similar manner. What's the latest, Adam?
Right, so Seoul's military said it had picked up one suspected North Korean individual on the Eastern Front and handed them over to the relevant authorities. The soldier was believed to have walked south using the road along the East Coast. He is known to be a staff sergeant. South Korea's military apparently tracked and monitored the individual and conducted an operation to guide the person into the south. Now, the Kaesong area where the crossover happened is close to where Seoul has been carrying out loudspeaker propaganda broadcasts. That was in retaliation to Pyongyang Pyongyang's continued trash balloon launches. Now, the campaign has reportedly included news of the defection of a former North Korean diplomat, as well as a message urging North Koreans to escape from what they're calling slave-like lives. But the Joint Chiefs of Staff said further analysis is needed to determine whether the broadcast actually affected the move. Now, it's also near where North Korean soldiers were recently seen laying mines. That was part of the regime's efforts to prevent North Koreans from crossing the border, but of course it hasn't really worked that well. No unusual movements by the North Korean military have been detected so far.
All right. Thank you so much, Anna, for today's coverage. We'll speak to you again tomorrow.
Stay dry. You're very welcome. I'll see you tomorrow.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.